On the horn right now, Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist. Good morning, Tony. How are you?
Morning, Doug. Morning, Kelly. How's everybody doing today?
Hi, Tony.
Doing fine. Yeah, really. You can't tell the players without a scorecard around here.
Okay, let's start over. Take two.
And speaking of which, I think I'm going to have to. This is like reading Dr. Zhivago, which I read years ago, and I actually had to take a legal pad and write down all the names of all the players and characters because they kept dropping in and out. In this whole business with the governor, not only here in St. Louis, but in Jefferson City, there are so many players coming and going, it's hard to keep track of all this stuff.
Well, and what's fascinating about it is because the governor is dealing with multiple legal issues, 2 criminal cases and a civil lawsuit, as well as potential other investigations based on statements made by Attorney General Josh Hawley and others, it's just constantly changing. There is news every day that affects the governor's future. The biggest news yesterday is related to his trial, and jury selection should get started late this week. It's scheduled to start Thursday. But 2 big pieces of news related to his trial came out yesterday. One, Judge Rex Burleson is going to allow the governor's victim to testify. The governor's attorneys have been trying to quash her testimony because at one point she was interviewed by the investigator, William Tisby, who may or may not have been lying during part of the legal process. But Judge Burleson said the jury deserves to hear from the victim, so she's going to testify. That is a major point in favor of the prosecution in that case. On the other side, as it relates to the prosecution, they admitted in court that their evidence that the photo was taken and transmitted is circumstantial evidence, meaning that they don't have a physical photo. That's not a death knell to their case. There's lots of cases, we constantly hear of murder cases with circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence doesn't mean it's not evidence. It just means that there's not a smoking gun, so to speak. But that clearly works to the governor and his defense team's advantage. It is a win for them in a series of losses in terms of court rulings and news breaking on his various cases.
Did the woman in question ultimately have to give up her phone because there was some legal dickering going on?
She did. This is one of the interesting things about this case, and I've been working on a column about it, looking at various court rulings and filings. What's interesting is, in the criminal case, the governor has not had to give up his phone. And in the criminal case, the victim has had to give up her phone. So the phone that is at the center of the case, the governor's, has not been examined by the prosecution. The victim's phone has been examined. We don't know the details yet. It was they cut a deal where a special master, basically like a retired judge who's appointed by the judge in the case, is going to examine the phone with a forensic specialist and then ultimately decide in chambers whether or not there's anything there that can or cannot enter the case.
Right.
So as far as I know, we don't know yet whether or not anything on that phone is going to be evidence in the case, but her phone was, despite the objections of her attorney, allowed to be examined.
And it sounds as though going down this road, the possibility of the picture, let's just hypothetically assume the picture was taken, it went to the cloud. If the governor sent that photograph to this woman, it may be residing on her phone or somewhere in the cloud that could be found. I also understand that the judge, it sounded like he made pretty quick order on a lot of these things that were on the table yesterday with all these attorneys milling about. And he said, look, this is on the docket. We're going to go Monday. Period. End of discussion. Let's not fool around with it. And the audio recordings or audio playback, that I don't think I read anything about that as to how he ruled on that particular situation, because the media obviously would like to get something in there.
Sure, and I have not read about that either. We've had some discussions in the newsroom about how we're going to cover this. I believe Judge Burleson is going to, severely limit the amount of media in the actual courtroom. So my hope is that there is a spillover courtroom where other reporters can, watch the trial on closed circuit or something like that. That's my hope and expectation. But it's going to be, I don't know how long the trial is going to take. I would expect jury selection in a case like this is going to take several days. But Judge Burleson has been pretty no-nonsense. It's scheduled. He wants it to go. He's trying to avoid delays. And so right now, as far as we know, jury selection is going to start Thursday and Friday.
And then turning to Jefferson City and the legal action, potential legal action there, it sounds as though they are moving forward toward potentially bringing the governor up on impeachment charges.
Yeah, there's no doubt that's where it's headed. The House and the Senate voted overwhelmingly. Only a few people didn't sign the petition to call itself into special session, which is historic. It's never happened before. The legislature has never called itself into special session to discipline or impeach a governor. Now, that doesn't mean 100% it's a done deal, but lawmakers don't sign onto a petition like that if the Speaker of the House isn't confident that he's got the votes to go forward. It would be embarrassing for the Speaker to call such a special session, go through the process, have the committee recommend impeachment, which I believe they will in their final report, and then not be able to have the votes to do it. Where the real drama is going to be is if the criminal case, as it's scheduled to, is completed before the House comes back to meet on impeachment, and if the governor is acquitted. I believe if the governor's acquitted, it doesn't stop the impeachment process. They're not impeaching just because of this one criminal charge. It's a whole variety of things, including the other criminal charge, the stealing of criminal tampering, basically the stealing of the nonprofit donor list. But if he's acquitted, I'm sure that peels a few impeachment votes away and makes the math much harder for the House. And so that's where the real drama will be. If he's convicted, there's no doubt he will be impeached. End of story. It will be a quick process. That would be the one time in which I could imagine possibly the governor resigning. I don't think it's in his DNA to do it. But if he were convicted, maybe he resigns.
Tony, do you find it interesting that the mistress in the case had to hand over her cell phone, and yet the governor has not had to do that yet?
Yeah, I find that, and I've been asking various legal experts about it, and, there is a difference in standard because the governor's the defendant, and he's got constitutional protections against self-incrimination. The victim in this case isn't a defendant. She's not being charged with anything, so there is a different standard. But here's the interesting thing. The private attorneys who have filed the lawsuit in Jefferson City in Cole County against the governor alleging violation of Sunshine Law, open records law, because he uses a text message app that destroys text messages, they're asking for the governor's phone also. And more than likely, they're going to get it in that case. But the governor's fighting that as well. So there's a bit of contradiction here in terms of the governor's legal strategy. We want your phone, but you can't have ours. In the court of public opinion, I don't think that looks very good.
When we meet again, because we're going to have to run here, I want to talk a little bit more with you about who's paying for what, because there's a scrum of attorneys and there's a lot of billable hours that are going on here, and this is, for the governor to have his defense, he's paying a lot of money. But we'll continue with this conversation, I'm sure, next week. And Tony, thank you for your time this morning.
You got it. Thanks for your time. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist.